medicine and then went back to Harvard to write this book. He's able to contrast the two medicines, how they work, and how they can work together to give patients the best healthcare possible. Chinese medicine, they come up with 10 essential models of understanding the harmonies and disharmonies of the body. One of the models they use is the contrast, yin and yang, of heat and cold. So, for example, we had a patient with very bad lower back pain, and the alternatives for her were to either do surgery or freeze the vertebra. She came to our clinic to seek treatment. The diagnosis for her was too much cold in the body. She had a pale complexion, a pale tongue, a slow pulse. If we asked her about her urine, she'd say it's very clear urine, not a dark urine. These are all signs of cold. And she had a few of these symptoms of excess cold. So we gave her a warming acupuncture treatment and warming herbs, and that balanced her body and the pain went away. So it's using these 10 quite specific models that Chinese medicine uses to understand the harmonies and disharmonies in a person and to balance it so that the symptoms that they come to us with are either reduced or eliminated. Because Chinese medicine embraces the basic foundations of Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, it embraces Chinese culture, which are based on those three ways of thinking, organizing society. As you read the book, they're just very commonsensical observations. Once you get exposed to these ideas as applied to our health, then you say, I know now how to cool myself down if there's too much heat, or how to warm myself up if I'm getting pains from too much cold. And the incredible grace of Chinese medicine is that they linked the diagnosis to the acupuncture points and the herbs. So there's many herbal formulas which do many things to help our health, but there's certain herbal formulas which include cinnamon, which is a warming herb, which warm the body. So as a layperson, the more you get into it, the more you see, oh yeah, this makes sense. It's not that esoteric or far out.
Well, welcome to everybody. We are so happy that you all are here. And very shortly, I'm going to pass this right along to President Ron Zaidman. But we did want to say that we are very pleased to be able to bring you a panel of professors, alums, former students, and folks like myself who were in private practice for a long time, and some of us still are. And then we heard that siren call of academia. We wanted to either teach or, be a part of the education process as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And here, without further ado, is our wonderful university president, and that is Ron Zaidman. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Gigi. And I'll start with this slide here, where we see acupuncture in the middle of orthopedics and pharmacy, for those of you who are on a computer. The role of acupuncture in traditional Chinese medicine is growing in the US. And this type of sign, if you go to Kaiser Hospital here in California or Sutter Hospital, you will see it because they all have integrative medicine departments. And our goal in this series of webinars, this is the first one, is to give as much information, introductory information, to the public and to healthcare professionals, including medical doctors, who want to know what is this acupuncture? What is this traditional Chinese medicine? How does it work? So the easiest way to answer that question is really to read this book, The Web That Has No Weaver. And we'll be showing it in clearer pictures than this further in the presentation. Because this book, written by, as you may have seen in the introduction, a Harvard professor who spent many years in Asia, he really describes what this medicine is and how it works. And I believe everyone should read this book because, as they say, on an insurance, 15 minutes of your time, or certainly 15 hours of your time, are going to make a very big difference to the way you understand the harmonies and disharmonies of your own health. And you'll also understand what other acupuncturists and herbal medicine doctors are doing. You'll understand, instead of it being a mystery, you'll understand, okay, this is the models they're using. This is how it works. So today I'm very honored to introduce three of our faculty. One has been with the university for 37 years. He was one of the first faculty here, Dr. Jeffrey Pong. He comes from a long tradition of traditional Chinese medicine doctors. His grandfather and his father are very famous and well-known doctors in Guangzhou, China. And he himself also studied Western medicine, and we were very fortunate to have him. So he is the chair of our Chinese medicine herb department and our foundations and diagnosis department. So he will be the first speaker. And then we have Doc Mitchell, who we describe as a scholar in traditional Chinese medicine. He not only has a very successful practice, but he has become a scholar of the medicine and teaches courses like Chinese history and philosophy to show how the medicine is founded on these old ways of thinking and old ideas. And this is covered by Ted Kaptchuk in his book as well. And then we have Nicholas Hancock, one of our newer faculty, a great, actually a very accomplished martial artist. He performs in competitions in the US, and he has a very rich understanding of Asian culture and of the medicine. So I will start by giving the floor to Dr. Jeffrey Pong. Jeffrey, please share your ideas on traditional Chinese medicine with our viewers.
So basically, very simple. I think now everybody know, like now the global greenhouse effect. So you can see the weather, how big changing in the world. For example, like in New York, we never had the very, very strong, raining. Then some people die. In China too. So then what is that thing then? So in the, if we not take care, like a global warming or those kinds of things, so the extreme weather will be repeated again and again. Why we talk about that? Because basically in the Chinese medicine, we talk about the human inside, like a micro weather system. That's what like Ron says. So we had some like a patient, they are very like a cold. So then we'll be showing, like if the face will be pale. So then we will be using the warming method to treat. So like if, the human body inside the micro weather system is not the normal, or they are very, very extremely to be out of the balance, then the sickness or the pain will become. So then basically simple, we say the Chinese medicine will be like a what? To fixing your body inside the system to go to the balance, just like the weather. So cold or dry or heat. So that's what we use it, the needle, or we use it, the herbal medicine, or even though something like exercise, like Tai Chi. The main idea will be what? We will be put, the body back to the normal again, then we can be prevention, any sickness attack. So like in the Neijing, we talk about called, if your body had Zheng Qi, so even though any evil, like now, like COVID, so they won't, bother you. Okay, so that's what we simply say, that TCM system is like that. Okay, I think I just say like that sentence. Okay, Ron, I finished.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, I'll just do a brief interlude. The name of our university, Five Branches University, represents the traditional systems of Chinese medicine, which are acupuncture, herbal medicine, exercise and qigong, energetics, diet, and body work. So Dr. Pong was mentioning how both exercise and diet and recommendations around those can make a difference to the health of the patient. Thank you, Jeffrey. Next, I would like to introduce Doc Mitchell. As I say, we call him the scholar faculty member. So Doc, please share the rich ideas that you know about with our viewers.
Well, Ron, this is a large topic, and when you asked me to participate in this this video, I dug out my copy of The Web That Have No Weaver. It's very old and kind of well worn, but it speaks of a big journey. I had studied Western herbs for a number of years. Ran into an individual who was just learning Chinese medicine and shared some of his herb books and encouraged me to read The Web That Has No Weaver. To be honest, the first time I read it in 1985, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, so I reread it. And what I realized was it was a system of thinking deeply rooted in a culture that is largely different than the Western culture. I went down to Five Branches and I spent a couple days sitting in Jeffrey Pong's classes. Dr. Pong amazed me with his understanding of the medicine and his just common sense understanding of life. And then I attended an acupuncture class with Joanna Zhao, who became one of my main teachers. And again, the same realization. So you must know that when I first started studying the medicine, it was out of curiosity. I never really expected to have a practice. It was just intellectual curiosity. What happened was that curiosity kept driving me. The more I learned, the more I wanted to know. And over the years, after practicing for 7 years, I began my practice in 1989. After practicing for 7 years, Joanna, who was the dean, asked me to begin teaching, which led me a deeper level into it. The Web That Has No Weaver was a profound outline, a basic outline of a cultural view that became over the years an applied philosophy. When we look to Chinese culture, and this is part of the first semester class, the first trimester class I teach, we walk through the literate history. Literally, Chinese culture is a 2,500 year cult of, I would say excuse me, I'm uneasy on camera sometimes. A 2,500 year conversation by literate individuals. They keep asking, what is life? One of the interesting things I found about classical Chinese thought was that they keep asking the question, how does life work? Not so much the what. We in the West have excelled in the material sciences, but the classical Chinese thinkers were asking how life works in the outside. So as Dr. Jeffrey Pong said, you know, we have an internal microclimate system. We have processes that are inside of us that need to be functioning, that are working with the outside world. And the outside world is basically the Taoist understanding is nature. That is what it is. So we are in constant relationship with this world. When we are healthy, we are dealing with it skillfully. When these internal imbalances begin to occur, we become vulnerable to pathologies. So literally, the Chinese physician is going to be talking about the terrain and the pathology. So for example, you know, a farmer may suddenly develop a mosquito problem. The Western physician may start talking about how to kill the mosquitoes. the Chinese doctor may start looking for the pond or the swamp that has suddenly developed. So we use acupuncture to help with these issues. Acupuncture works on the channel theory, as Ron mentioned earlier. There are 10 basic frameworks of analysis and diagnosis that a modern doctor might use. We might use the channel therapy to work on orthopedic issues, to engender some kind of change inside the body. We may use herbs to change the environment. That may involve warming up the body. It may be involving draining off some of the dampness. One of the significant issues I see personally in clinical practice, is people not assimilating life well. In other words, your challenge as a human being is to basically bring in nourishment, digest it, assimilate actually the stuff that you need and be able to move forward in life. Well, when this process is not done well, then you're going to see weaknesses when you become weak over time, pathologies start to accumulate. It's not rocket science to see that weak people get sick more often. As we age, there is a process by which we slowly begin to degrade, if you will. One of the first things to weaken is digestion. So one of the things Dr. Pong has taught very well is that diet is so important. And so the Chinese, one of the 5 branches of our medicine, our response to an illness, is going to be looking at the diet. So when I sit down to talk to a patient, I've been doing this for a long time now, and I just continually find my curiosities piqued about life. When I sit down to talk to a patient, I'm going to be taking note of a pain or a complaint they may have, but I'm going to be looking at it, not only the pain, but I'm going to be looking at their digestion. I'm going to be looking at their sleep. As a female, I might be looking at their menstrual cycling or the relationship they may have with their family or their work or their significant other, because all of these things actually play into my diagnosis. And a diagnosis is rarely, especially as people age, a diagnosis is rarely going to be just one pattern that's wrong, that's a little bit off. You probably find maybe 3 to 5, sometimes even more if somebody's been chronically ill for a while. And so as Ron mentioned, that diagnosis, if you will, is going to generate a treatment principle that is going to suggest an herb formula or a particular combination of herbs. So what I found interesting, going back to the herb story, was that Chinese doctors have their own system of understanding herbs that, quite frankly, is nothing like the Western biomedical model that I had been studying. In fact, it is an empirical model. And in fact, what I found with Chinese medicine over the decades, that I've been practicing, is that the whole medicine and the whole philosophy of life that you see being recorded from Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching through Confucius, Mencius, Junzi, Mozi, and Chuangzi, it's very empirical. It's very, very practical. We tend to think of the Chinese model as sort of esoteric, but it cannot be more wrong. The history and philosophy class that I teach takes people back, and we do a walking and working tour through that, studying the observations of life, literally the early books that were written, the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, the Songhun Lun, the Jingwei. These are books that were written probably about 2,000 years ago, and they were a codification of life experiences. The biology of life today is very much the same as it was then. Human physiology is much the same. And the observations these ancient Chinese sages have is as relevant to today's world as they were then. They're very
we're a little bit short of time, so if you can wrap up for us, yes. That would be great.
Okay. I wasn't timing myself. I was just going to say that it's a very practical medicine. It's a deep study, and it's really good for those of you that are curious about life, and it's a great way to go to work.
Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you so much. So next, I'm very happy to introduce our faculty member, also Associate Dean at the university and the director of our, we have a fully online program for licensed acupuncturists, Nick Hancock. Nick, welcome.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I'm a very fortunate individual, partially due to the fact that I had both Dr. Pong and Doc Mitchell as teachers of mine as I went through the program at Five Branches. So everything that they have described and kind of articulated about this medicine is, I can, as I'm reflecting on their words, is deeply embedded in their instruction and actually all the curriculum here at Five Branches. So, you know, when I first started the program at Five Branches, we were all asked to read a copy of this book. And, you know, much of the book is very well articulated, organized, technical information about the nature of Chinese medical concepts and thoughts, how Chinese medicine frame of looking at the human body and the human experience applies to the individual person. But it was really the first chapter that stood out to me the most. In the first chapter, Ted Kaptchuk really does an excellent job of outlining our ways of looking at the world and how they inform systems like, you know, healthcare and medical theories and thought. In that first chapter, he brings up some things that have already been echoed by what we heard from Dr. Pong and from Doc Mitchell and also from Ron Zeidman, our president. The most important one, and I think it's, again, it's in all the conversations and all the things we've heard so far, is that Chinese medicine is a systematic view of medical theory and of the human body, and actually of the entire natural world. It's systematic and it's based on principles that we can observe in nature. I often ask myself, and I ask my students to reflect on why and how Chinese medicine can still be relevant, effective, and so potent, even 2,200 years after it was already fully formed by the time the Neijing was written in the Han Dynasty. How is it that we're still talking about it today? And really, to me, one of the big parts of that how is simply based on the fact that it is rooted in natural principles, natural phenomenon, things that we can observe, things that we can relate to. Chinese medicine takes, and this is also reflected in the first chapter of Web That Has No Weaver. Chinese medicine takes our human experience as the context for the medical system. So it already merges some things that, you know, the Western view has attempted to kind of peel apart, and that's the nature of the relationship between subject and object, right? In Western medicine, we're trying to identify variables, isolate variables, hone in on disease factors and pathogens. And that view is one that's led to extraordinary outcomes, right? But Chinese medicine is rather unique in the fact that it seeks to unify the subject and object, right? In terms of the data that's being gathered medically. What this instantly does is it makes it relevant to all human beings of all times and all places. So it is today still extremely relevant and impacting our modern US healthcare system. But my thought and feeling is that if it can contribute this kind of inclusive view, this view that invites everyone who's a human being to participate, then it will continue to be relevant as long as there are human beings on planet Earth. So for me, that's part of the reason I'm really excited to be a part of what's going on here at Five Branches and to contribute, and also to have, you know, wonderful students who are discovering the same thing that I think Doc has discovered, Dr. Pong has discovered, I've discovered, everyone here has discovered. It's really an inspiring message that's inside of the curriculum and what could be seen as something technical or dry, like, you know, information that we're reading out of medical textbooks, but actually it's inviting us back into our own experience. So that's my reflection on the first chapter. So thanks so much, Ron, and thanks Dr. Pong and Doc for sharing in this forum.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick and Doc. Actually, his name is Doc Mitchell. Very much. So I see a question in our chat asking us and the panel, if we were to write, what would you write differently if you chose to write your own TCM book? So, Nick, do you want to start?
Yeah, of course I can. That's a great question for me, actually, because I took notes on that first chapter. So, one of the things that I think, Ted Kaptchuk does a really excellent job of doing in The Web That Has No Weaver is outlining the distinct qualities of the two systems of thought that have led to Chinese medicine and Western biomedicine, respectively. But one of the things that I thought he could have maybe voiced a little bit stronger was something, basically the same thing that I said in my commentary, was the fact that it's our human experience that allows these models to overlap. It's all happening in a human body. It's all happening on planet Earth. It's all based on principles of nature. So, Chinese medicine has a specific view. Western biomedicine has a specific view. Ultimately, we're talking about human beings. To me, that's what I would have emphasized just a little bit more in that first chapter. What about you, Dr. Pong and Doc?
Okay. I would like to follow through with Nick's comment. And I was getting to, it is a human experience that we're examining. I think that in the West, we look at the material sciences and we have the chemistry and the physiology and the anatomy and all that. But, emphasizing more the opportunities for personal cultivation, for looking at life. When we look at these classics, again, there is the examination of how life works, but how to have a productive relationship with it. Literally, this medicine 2,000 years ago was called yang shen. And yang shen translates to nourishing life. It's about living skillfully within the context, within these principles, these patterns of nature. Many people today live in urban environments. We can't even see the sky at night. And yet this is the world that the Chinese inhabited that informed a lot of these healthcare principles. So I think I would spend a little more time talking about the relationship with nature because people can discover this themselves. It is inclusive. It is something that is open to everybody. It is a study and it takes time to, look into it. It takes education. But I think that, an emphasis on personal participation in this model and some of the classic, thinkers of China would be really, really helpful. Again, it's a huge subject, but I think Five Branches is working towards increasingly towards developing the scholar doctor. So that's a good question.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. If I were if I were going to add something to that book is when one looks into the models that Chinese medicine uses for diagnosis, it's really I was studying engineering for a while, so I sometimes use this engineering lens. It's really quite brilliantly designed as an engineer might do. Because they take an array of signs and symptoms. So you might have, headache and this and that and the other. And they translate that array of signs and symptoms to a diagnosis. And the vocabulary of that diagnosis is the same vocabulary that they use for the herbal formula. They link the two. In Western medicine, we do very sophisticated diagnosis, but this link has not had 2,000 years, actually 2,500 years to be developed. So the links are not that clear, but in Chinese medicine, they are. So to say, if you have these array of signs and symptoms, this is the root cause, this is the diagnosis, and from this is the formula we will use, and these are the acupuncture. So he touches on the different models, but he never, in my view, never summarizes it in a way to understand how the whole system works. So, Gigi, do we have some other questions that I know we don't have too much time. Actually, we're right at 5:30.
Yes, we're just about there, although we did want to give Professor Pong a moment. Are you able to, can we hear you, Professor Pong? to finish up any last thoughts that you might have. And if not, there might be one or two other questions. One thing that I did want to ask you very briefly is actually, I've been reading something. I've been thinking about something I read in The Web That Has No Weaver for so long. I don't think we can necessarily address it, but if anybody has a really good understanding of it, jump in right now on this panel. I know, Nick, you're going to love this one. Basically, I remember Ted Kaptchuk saying, in the West, the truth of things is transcendent. In the East, the truth of things is immanent. I've been thinking about that for 20 years. I don't fully understand it. So if anybody would like to jump in, please do.
That is a very interesting question. If Nick, you want to run with it, but
yeah.
There's a principle called Li, L-I, in Chinese thinking that became part of the conversation 1,000 years ago. But basically, it's the patterns. It's the patterns of heaven. And you can see what we call heaven is basically principles of nature. You can see them in the world around us. You can see it in the flow of water, in the current. You can see it in the mandate of the stomach function. Stomach has a particular description. And you can see it, it's not somewhere else. The answer is not somewhere else, it's here. And we can learn to see that by looking at things through these filters. I was going to say one more thing about when Ron was talking about these patterns of disharmony. You know that the empire, the first emperor of China, designed the empire around the principles of the human body and around life. The same principles we see in Chinese medicine were the political principles that were used in the Han Dynasty. So this is not just a medical way of looking at things, it's actually political too, and has to do with the sense of life on planet Earth. So we can see it right in front of us. Nick, I'm sorry, I jumped in.
Oh, no, totally. Yeah, no, great. That's a very helpful context around Gigi's question, Doc. Yeah, so my direct answer, my perspective on the difference between the immanence of truth versus the transcendence of truth and the relationship to those two traditions, right? So why does Ted Kaptchuk say that for Chinese thought, truth is immanent? My explanation for that statement is simply, as a practitioner yourself, Gigi, you know that when we're in clinic, we'll do things like look at a red tongue body and say, okay, red tongue body means heat, right? We'll look at something like a bowstring wiry pulse and say, okay, bowstring wiry pulse, that means chi stagnation, right? The truth of that statement is, right? We don't need to ask, well, what is the primary, the root cause of all cosmic heat from some heat god or some kind of heat, particle, or no, we just simply say the tongue body's red means there's heat, right? The apprehension of truth is through our observation of nature. It's right in front of us, right? To say that truth is transcendent is implying that there must be something behind what we're observing. There must be something far away that we can't understand, and that must be the truth, right? So it's these two different ways of just talking about what truth is. My personal reaction when I read that in Kaptchuk's book was that I think in the Chinese tradition, it's actually both transcendent and immanent at the same time. Because I think that these principles of nature, which in Chinese thought, we often are referring to heaven, qi, tian, right? We're talking about patterns, natural patterns that inform activity as we see it manifest in the world around us. Something about that truth is immanent in that we can't explain, don't need to explain it. It's right in front of us. But I think also the principle that embeds in reality to show us those truths, those principles are actually transcendent themselves, right? So that's like the first line of the Tao Te Ching, which says, the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao, right? To me, that's a very transcendent statement. So I actually think, and so maybe this is answer to both questions. What would I have written differently about Kaptchuk's book? I might have said that Chinese thought has both transcendent and immanent truth.
Thank you so much, Nick. So Gigi, thank you, the panelists, very much. I hope our listeners appreciated this, and we will do more of this later. So do write in your comments so we can plan for our next one. So Gigi, I'll pass it to you for the next,
Thank you so much.
for the next part.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to our panel.